China has just lost the space race. But that wasn't their plan. Their plan was to stand on the shoulders of giants and then shoot them in the head. We have a lot to unpack in this video. What exactly are China's ambitions in space? China is a so-called developing country, which has for decades been receiving billions of dollars in foreign aid and special trade status in the World Trade Organization because it's just a poor developing country. And one might agree if you were to travel through rural China that China is still developing. But why is this developing country spending so much money on a space program? Why do they keep lying about and hiding their successes, failures, and even deadly military maneuvers in space? More importantly, why does the rest of the world send financial aid and give China very special trade concessions under the guise of China being a developing country? And yet, China has an advanced space program with space stations, satellites, missions to the moon and Mars. Why is China so proud to achieve something which the USA and the Soviets achieved when our parents were still in kindergarten? To understand what's happening right now, we need to take a brief look at the history of the Chinese space program. Like almost every aspect of modern China under the Communist Party, the Chinese space program was born out of envy and insecurity. The murderous dictator Mao was constantly trying to keep up with and emulate the Soviet Union. And after the success of the Soviet Sputnik, he declared that China too would send a satellite into space. I've found murals in rural China on the walls of schools worshipping Sputnik and other Soviet achievements, and yes, those murals still exist. This footage that I've just shown you was taken circa 2018, thereabouts. You know, it just kind of dawned on me doing research into this topic that almost every absurd and disastrous policy put forth by the Chinese Communist Party was some kind of an answer to an achievement by either the Soviets or the United States. You know, this need for China to quickly, when I say China, of course, I'm talking about the Communist Party here, to quickly sort of catch up or prove that they are also an advanced nation, that they are also capable of being on the same level as much more developed nations. Now, I'm not going to go into detail, but suffice it to say it was a struggle for China to keep up, and due to political instability, their space program was insignificant, and there's a reason you didn't hear about it back in the day. Small wins and a lot of failure. It wasn't until the 21st century that China finally started to catch up. In 2003, they managed to finally send a man into orbit, 42 years after old Yuri did it. Still an achievement, but again, we have to question why. Why was it so important for China to send a man into space? There's no longer a Cold War era space race. You can't enter a race that has already been won half a century later and expect it to be cheered on and admired, right? But that's what China wanted. To use existing technologies, tried and true methods developed all the way back in the 40s and 50s by German scientists like Wernher von Braun that have been put into practice through great cost, research, development, sacrifice and perseverance by both the United States and the Soviets, not to mention other nations that have also been involved in advancing space technology.
Here, men from the planet Earth, first set foot upon the moon, July 1969, AD. It came in peace for all mankind.
As the first man stepped on the moon, China was in its darkest period of modern history. Uncountable people were dying of self-inflicted famine and cultural destruction by Mad Mao. My point is that China's entrance to the space race serves two purposes, and neither of them are for the advancement of mankind. The first and most obvious reason is for propaganda and national pride. And of course, it has already served this purpose in spades. To be the third independent country to send a man into space, and to undertake space-related missions on their own space station, and to have missions to the moon and Mars, although, for some reason, all of their space missions are in CG, and by that I mean every time they report on their achievements in space, they can never really show real footage. I find it kind of bizarre that 90% of all the footage coming out of the Chinese equivalent of NASA is CG renditions of what they've done. I don't get it. Back in the 60s, America and the Soviets were actually able to film their missions to the moon, their missions into outer space. Why is it that China, in the modern day, doesn't have the technology, or cameras, I guess, to film their spaceships doing what they say they're doing? It's always some kind of CG representation. And of course, this does raise legitimate questions. Did the missions actually do what they said they did? Because there's no real proof other than these CG renditions they keep putting out. You know, did they happen at all? Did they not go to plan? We'll never know, because all we have to go on are these CG renditions in the word of the Chinese government and their space agency. Either way, these space missions help distract the vast population of poor and impoverished Chinese people who struggle hand to mouth. You may live in squalor and have to struggle to survive in poverty, but hey, look how strong and great our country is. We have taikonauts in space. Taikonaut, by the way, is the Chinese word for astronaut. That's the English term they've come up with. Taikong meaning space, and I guess naut is what they've contributed to space technology in general. Although, for some reason, their English propagandists just don't seem to be able to pronounce taikonaut right.
This is my new buddy, Air Taikonaut.
Dear Taikonaut, how is the food up there?
He's sending a crew of 3 Taikonauts into space.
Dear Taikonaut.
So I guess we're calling them Takonauts from now on. Now, all of these space missions and the space program has had a profound effect on the local people in China. Like I said, from a propaganda point of view, from a national pride point of view, but they've also had a big impact on the rest of the world, changing opinions about China drastically. I mean, how much more developed can you get? The cutting edge of technology is space exploration. And so to the average observer, China looks incredibly sophisticated and advanced. And in some cases appear to be more advanced than rival countries as they announce incredibly ambitious projects regarding Mars, the Moon, and beyond. This has countries scrambling to try and catch up to what they perceive as the threat of China expanding into space. And this brings us to the second reason for China's headlong rush into space.
I'm convinced that the Russian concept, that's as demonstrated by Sputnik number 2 carrying this animal, they consider the control of space around the Earth very much like, shall we say, the great maritime powers considered the control of the seas in the 16th to the 18th century. And they say if we want to control this planet, we have to control the space around it.
And that is military expansion and exploitation. Now, I'm not saying this to paint China as a baddie over here. The USA and other nations have historically always seen space as a military advantage. I mean, GPS wasn't invented so that you could conveniently find your way to Chuck E. Cheese. No, it was developed for the military. Thankfully, it made it into the civilian market so that we could all use it. Russia also has its own satellite navigation system, so their version of GPS is called GLONASS. And of course, China was very quick to implement their own satellite navigation system as soon as they could, and their satellite navigation system is called Beidou, and it has been successfully implemented more or less since about 2018. Now, it's very important to understand why China wants its own satellite navigation system. In practice, during wartime, GPS and GLONASS can be switched off for civilian use. In other words, just blocked off for military use only. And this would mean that the Chinese military would no longer have access to GPS satellites or GLONASS, for instance. And this would be a big problem because without satellite navigation, the PLA may not know which direction Taiwan is in, and it might result in them bombing Hainan Island by mistake. But all jokes aside, modern military vehicles and troops overly rely on satellite navigation. And so if satellite navigation were to be taken away, it would prove a massive disadvantage. And that is why China wants its own satellite navigation system, so that it can be self-reliant militarily. It also turns out that they want to disable other satellite navigation systems like GLONASS and GPS. As much as the Chinese government denies it, they've been caught out testing attack satellites with grappling arms designed to disable other satellites. Let's talk about China's Shijian-21 or SJ-21 satellite. On January 22nd of this year, China's SJ-21 satellite disappeared from its regular orbit. Now, this happened during daylight hours, which is on purpose because it makes it difficult to track and observe this satellite using optical telescopes. However, it was still observed, and what it did was kind of shocking. It was observed executing a maneuver which brought it right alongside another satellite. In this case, it was a discontinued Beidou satellite. You know, we talked about their GPS system, so it was a dead satellite. It then grabbed the other satellite and pulled it out of its normal geosynchronous orbit and moved it hundreds of miles away into what is known as a super graveyard drift orbit, effectively throwing it away. These super graveyard drift orbits are for defunct satellites or satellites that are end of life, and it's basically a way to get rid of them and make them no longer useful. But it doesn't end there. SJ-21 has been under the spotlight a few times prior to this satellite-killing maneuver. In November 2021, a month after its launch, an unknown object was seen orbiting alongside it, which many speculate to have been an experimental payload of some kind, something to test SJ-21's ability to mess with other satellites. Even Chinese media and bloggers agree that SJ-21's remote proximity operations, such as its robotic arms, are dual use and can be used for both scientific and military operations. There have also been unverified reports that SJ-21 is also armed with a net to capture space debris, as well as other satellites, of course, as seen here on this social media post. Now, of course, the Chinese government is saying that this satellite is there to research how to deal with space debris. Sounds like a nice, noble scientific effort, but come on, let's be realistic here. The first thing it does is grab a satellite out of orbit and chuck it away, therefore making that satellite completely useless. Anyway, you look at this. You've got a Chinese satellite up there, pulling other satellites out of orbit and doing dodgy stuff. End of. Lying about the militarization of the South China Sea is something that China's famous for. Remember how the Chinese government promised it wouldn't militarize those fake islands built in contested waters in the South China Sea? Remember how they militarized them anyway, while still lying to the international community? Why would anyone not expect the same thing of their space endeavors? It's easy for them to lie about not militarizing their satellites, etc., since it's easy to say it's a scientific probe or a scientific mission, just like they lied about the fake islands being nothing but observation posts. Now, let's talk about the dark side of the moon.
You see people standing on the dark side of the moon, on the hardness of stuff like carbon dioxide in the ooze. Joy of success is like a weekend car right around the pool. We're gonna be the earth invader, forcing it into honey cretaceous. But I'd be the ready one player when in front of dirty polluter. Inject all the rapaciousness like shaking off that for all advices. Long to the hanging garden, so we turn the entire space into oasis. We got obsessions, we got obsessions. For the fragrance we bless, the world we show affection. See, we got obsessions, let me show you Chinese better. Turn the bygone session, we the 42 present.
Resource exploitation. This is something that China is very well known for. Chinese fishing fleets have for decades been destroying ecosystems and using underhanded tactics to exploit both protected fishing areas, such as the waters off the Galapagos Islands, as well as clandestinely turning off their transceivers at night to sneak into territorial waters off of the coast of Africa and South America to fish on an industrial scale, decimating sea life wherever they go. China does not play by any rules and will exploit limited resources until there are none left. This has many people worried about what their motives are when it comes to China's Moon and Mars missions. Whilst up until now, missions to the Moon and to Mars, etc. have been of a more scientific exploratory nature. You know, we're trying to find signs of life on Mars, we're trying to test the composition of the soil, that kind of thing. This has been the main sort of focus of these missions so far, these space missions by NASA and other joint efforts. China's motivations, however, are murky. China has been focusing on the dark side of the moon, and the primary reason is that currently there's no way to monitor what happens on the dark side of the moon. We cannot monitor the dark side of the moon from space. You know, you can't point a telescope up there and see what's happening on the other side of the moon, right? And there are currently no satellites in orbit around the moon to keep an eye on what's happening on the dark side, and even the space between Earth and the moon is kind of like a no man's land. Nobody can see what's going on there. In other words, if China does establish operations on the dark side of the moon, they could be military or exploitative in nature, and no one would be able to see what they get up to. And just like their promises of not militarizing the fake islands in the South China Sea, they could tell the world and the international community that, we're just conducting scientific experiments on the dark side of the moon. Meanwhile, they could be doing absolutely anything. Fairly recently, NASA Administrator Bill Nelson accused China of stealing technology from other nations, and he also said, and I quote, "We must be very concerned that China is landing on the moon and saying, 'It's ours and now you stay out.'" You see, there's been a kind of an international agreement that the moon doesn't belong to any particular nation, but we don't know where this is going to go with China, because China tends to claim things. They claim that an ancient map proves that parts of India belong to China. Oh, now it's parts of Russia belong to China. And of course, the entire South China Sea, just because, there's an ancient map that says so, that type of thing. So, you got to be worried about this sort of attitude when it comes to the moon. They might be like, we landed on the dark side of the moon and we're the first to set up a base, so this is now ours, that kind of thing. You never know. Something to keep an eye on. And this is what the NASA administrator is saying here, not me. At this point, it must be noted that China has been banned from entering the International Space Station, or the IS, as this lovely Chinese propaganda song calls it.
Dear Techno, how is the new home? Do its people come over and say hi? Spatial health, spatial food, spatial love, spatial cap, spatial. I hope Gumbao chick still tastes the same.
This, of course, goes back to what the NASA administrator was saying about stealing technologies. Chinese nationals have been excluded from the ISS since 2011 because of fears of tech transfer. And I mean, can you blame the USA? Absolutely all of China's modern military hardware are just knockoffs of US or other countries' technology. Don't believe me? Take a look at this. Why innovate when you can abuse trust and steal? That is the CCP's motto. Well, their secret motto behind closed doors, I'm guessing. So there you have it. As an avid enthusiast of space technology, I'm all for the advancement of space exploration. But I know the Chinese government, and their operations in space are 100% self-serving and need to be seen for what they are and what they serve. They serve to further China's expansionist and exploitative goals, especially from a military point of view, and of course, as a massive propaganda distraction from the incredibly real issues modern China faces. I'd like to finish this off by saying that there's nothing wrong with being proud of what your country has achieved, and I'm happy that young Chinese children can dream of being technauts someday.
Dear Techno, heard you made it to the space. Spatial health, spatial food, spatial love, spatial cap, spatial.
But why is it that in 2020 the UK sent £70 million of financial aid to China? Why is it that billions of dollars have recently been sent to China through foreign aid? And why is it that China gets trillions of dollars in subsidies and benefits through the World Trade Organization by claiming developing status, all the while spending these billions of pounds and dollars meant to feed hungry people and help China's poor on rocket ships and military satellites? Surely it's time to stop feeding the communist government and put a stop to funding their military ambitions. They're not developing anymore, and if they want to claim they're developing, then why the hell do they have a space program? Anyway, you know the drill. As always, stay awesome.
See the large rolling miles upon miles, but we